You're listening to the Living Inside Out podcast, and I'm your host, Tokes Aroture. This is episode 96. Welcome to the Living Inside Out podcast, where we discuss the role of mindset and spirituality in propelling our lives forward. Episode 96 is The Power of Perspective, Seeing Neutrality in Every Challenge. Happy new month! If you are listening in real time, then we are in June. We have just arrived in June a few days ago. Welcome to my new listeners and to my OG tribe. I am stoked that you're here today, and I really can't wait to dig into today's topic. But before I say anything else, I've got a couple of announcements. I'm going to be running a PR workshop on the 27th of June. Why am I running a PR workshop? Because I built my business from scratch and I had zilch, zero, nada. I had nothing. I had to learn how to do everything myself. I had hired a PR agent for a few months in the very early days, learned everything that I could and continued to use it. This was how many years ago? 16 or so years ago when I arrived back in the UK. And so my business experience of living in the United States and working with the press and so on, all paying for all of that, taught me a thing or two. And then coming over here with nothing, where I couldn't pay for anything, taught me even more. And I want to share what I've learned. I want to teach you what I've learned, because I believe that as an entrepreneur, you should really have some knowledge in all of the different departments of running your business. PR is one area that many small businesses struggle with, and they tend to end up paying for advertisements instead, which is quite expensive. And a lot of startups or small companies can't actually afford it. And the truth is, for advertising to be effective, you've got to do it for a long time consistently. I remember when I learned about magazine advertising in the US, the readers have to see your brand about 3 or 4 times before they actually see it, which means you are advertising for 3 or 4 months consistently without any response to it before they finally notice that, hey, I've seen this brand somewhere. And so I'm going to be sharing my knowledge, the tips and tricks and ways in which you can get free PR without breaking the bank, without paying for it really. And there's a charge for this, and it requires registration, but all the details are in the show notes below, or you can head to my website tokesaroture.com and click on services and you'll find the workshop there. Also, you can drop a line to Priel, my assistant, pa@tokesaroture.com, all spelled out. Looking forward to that. It's going to be really good. Now, I've noticed that I've got a surge of new listeners, or a surge in new listeners. Thank you so much to every single person that has subscribed, reviewed and shared Living Inside Out. It is working because people are listening. More and more people are finding this podcast. I'm so excited and I want to thank you. But if you haven't yet subscribed or given me a 5-star rating, can I ask that you do so? It's a small gesture, but I promise it will go a very long way. Finally, before we dig into today's episode, I would really love to connect with you on social media. I share a lot more content on there, but more importantly, I just want to connect with you. I want to know who's listening. I want to know what's going on in your life. I want to chat with you. My Instagram handle is Tokes Aroture, and it's the same on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. So today we are talking about circumstances. Circumstances are neither good nor bad. This was a statement I made in the previous episode, and it's been on my mind ever since. The essence of it is that it's not the circumstance itself that's causing discouragement or sadness or pain or joy or happiness or anger. It's our thoughts about the circumstance. It's the way that we're seeing it, and it's the way that our minds are interpreting it to us. Circumstances are neutral. I want you to have an open mind about this, and let's go on this journey to try and decipher this together. I have had this concept in mind for a number of years, but I've never really arrived at a point where I felt I could articulate it properly, not even to myself. I can't, it makes sense in my head, but putting words to it has been a bit of a challenge. So I'm going to try and do that today. And I hope that I make sense, and I hope that you will give me your feedback and let me know if you agree or if it makes sense to you. Circumstances are neutral, they don't carry any power, they just are. It is what we think about them that creates specific emotions. And that's why we can have two people in the same situation, yet they have completely different reactions to it. One feels joy, the other feels anger. Same scenario. Now, there are various factors that obviously influence our perception of a situation: our personality, culture, mood, mental state, so much more. But ultimately, it's our thoughts that directly affect our emotions, which means that it's not the circumstance, but it's our thoughts about it. I first came across this concept a few years ago, and while I believed it, I didn't have the words, like I said, to explain it fully. But recently, especially in the month of May, and honestly, today even, my life seems determined to prove it to be true. Sometimes I say, Lord, I don't need a trying season to test the idea that we can continue to advance despite our difficulties. Yet, here I am in a perplexingly difficult season, trying to find the neutrality in my current circumstance. I find that I have been wishing away this season, daydreaming about a different set of circumstances, and also looking back and wondering if there was something I could have done to change where I stand today. But this whole thought process has done more than just led me into whinging and complaining and so on, but it's placed me in a rather observant state where I'm observing my life and I'm observing the lives of anyone that I come across, people around me, especially when I hold conversations with friends and just about clients. Everyone seems to be dealing with one thing or the other. So maybe it's growing up season. Maybe this is a season where, hey, Madam Talks, life is actually tough, and it's always tough. It just gets interspersed with good moments. I don't know. But I know that my life is trying to prove this neutrality in circumstances, and I'm looking for it, and I'm actively trying to do it. So about 4 years ago, I finally agreed. I think it was actually earlier because it was before pandemic. 5 years, can't believe it's been that long. I agreed finally to my children's pleas for a pet. Growing up, we always had pets: dogs, cats, even a monkey. We had a couple of exotic animals, which I have confessed to on this podcast. Our home was called Ferreira Zoo because I lived in Benin, and Benin people are extra. So we're talking crocodile, and what was the other one? An anteater. Nobody knew what the anteater was. My parents didn't know what it was. We didn't know what it was. The people, the indigents of Benin, knew what it was, but they didn't know the name in English, and they didn't know what it fed on. It was supposed to be a gesture of gratitude to my father because he did something for someone. But anyway, that was my life in Benin. I love pets. My husband loves pets, but yet my children had been begging for a dog, and I said no over the years. The reason I didn't want to have pet, I didn't want them to have a pet, was because of the heartache of losing them. Being in Benin again was rather rural compared to Lagos, for example, and we were surrounded by farms. There were lots of snakes, and the snakes kept biting the dogs, and we didn't know. We just knew that they'll fall ill and die. And every single time it was gut wrenching. It was sad. We cried. Even my mom cried. I remember when our monkey died, poor monkey got ran over by a car, and that was so sad. So I decided I don't want my children to experience the pain that I did having pets. But one day it occurred to me that the doorway through which pain enters the heart is the same doorway through which joy comes in. And so, by preventing them from experiencing the pain of losing a pet, I was also holding them back from experiencing the joy of having one. So I agreed and finally got them, but I didn't get them a dog. I really wanted us to have a dog, but I knew that these boys of mine will one day just abandon the care aspect of the dog to me, and all they'll do is will be to play with it, and I'll be left taking that dog for walks and everything. And I just didn't want to put myself in that position. So I got rabbits. Rabbits are very easy to care for. They look after themselves. They're very clean and everything. And they even use a litter tray as well, which was the most shocking thing I found out about them. So we had to pet rabbits. And Hera and Hazel lived with us for a few years, when after which I had to say goodbye to them because I developed an allergy to their fur. But the point is that joy and pain are experienced in the same space. So hold that thought for a minute. I'm going to go off tangent a little bit, but we'll come back together. Today, I find myself thinking along these lines again regarding pain. I was listening to a recording by Earl Nightingale where he said that to be successful, you have to voluntarily embrace pain and disappointment. And I agreed, and I agree, and I am embracing, I'm trying. I resolved to embrace pain and disappointment because guess what? We're going to have the pain and disappointment regardless of whether you choose to or not, regardless of whether it is voluntary or forced. So you might as well choose so that you have some level of control over your life as opposed to fighting against it. So I was in conversation with my friend Shade, and this whole thing about pain came up. I'm looking at my current set of circumstances, which are less than ideal. I have been emotionally drained, very tired, weary, exhausted, all of the words. That's been me for the last, it's been a while, but I think that May really doubled down. And the last couple of days have just been a challenge for me, to be honest. And in the midst of all of this, I'm trying to see the neutrality of it, and I'm trying to embrace it. I'm trying to say, hey, Tokes, let's grab this. Let's hug this challenge. Let's hug this difficulty. Let's not look for a way around it. But I was start chatting with my dear friend Shade, and we are literally sisters for life, and sisters in business, and sisters in so many ways. And so we're encouraging each other based on the season, similar sort of season that we're both in. She's also an entrepreneur. We talked about our business journeys, and she said something. She said, do you know that the things that we have today are the things we once prayed for? And that started a train of thoughts because I began thinking about how I've chosen to label this season of my life as tough, and I'm praying it away and wishing it away, when in reality, where I am today is something I once prayed desperately for. I don't know if you are feeling this, if this is also you. And what this does is it tells us that circumstances do not carry any joy or sadness within them. Circumstances don't have an intention. They don't have a plan or a desire to hurt you or help you. They are simply the foundation on which we build our lives, and they exist for us to do with them whatever we want to. It then follows that it is our thoughts towards a circumstance that's creating the emotions that we have. So, for example, think about my geography is not very good right now, but let's think about a country that is suffers from, let me not use the word suffers, but let's think of a country, an African country, for example. I'm going to go with Congo, where the soil is dry, the weather, the climate is dry and arid, and the ground is hard and not very fertile, right? Think about the farmers in Congo. Now let's think about farmers in another country or another part of Africa where the ground is really fertile. So I'm going to go with the south of Nigeria. think about Nigeria, where there's a lot of rain and lush vegetation, and we have no issues. And when it comes to farming, the farmers there, that's the ground on which they have to farm. The guys in Congo are not going to wake up every morning and complain about how hard the ground is. Do you know why? Because that is just the ground on which they stand. That's their circumstance. It's a fact. It's not a changed, it's not a situation that has suddenly flipped against them that morning when they woke up. This is literally the ground on which they stand. It is hard. And when they go out to work, they don't go there expecting that their implements are going to pierce through the ground effortlessly. They go in prepared to use their muscles and their energy to really dig because their ground is hard. Contrast that to those in a country where the ground is soft. When they go in, they expect that it's going to be soft. But guess what? Both of them, both farmers are going to have things that are challenging for them. Just because the Nigerian farmer soil is soft does not mean he's going to think, oh my goodness, every morning he wakes up, I'm so happy that I have soft soil. It's something that he takes for granted. It's his expectation because that's the fact, that's a circumstance. And the guy in the Congo isn't going to go, oh my goodness, the ground is so hard. I'm so tired of farming. Well, he doesn't have anything to compare it with. We complain when we have something to compare it with, and we compare unfavorably. Another example is the Gaza-Israel conflict that's ongoing. I remember shortly after it started, I was on my way to Nigeria, and in the airport there was, on the wall, there were two posters side by side. One said, Free Palestine. The other one said, I didn't say Free Israel, but it said the opposite of that. Two conflicting, or should I say two different bits of information addressing the same situation from two different viewpoints. There are people today who slam Israel and say what they're doing is horrible, and there are people today who slam Palestine and say you guys are nasty. Same circumstance, same war, different reactions to it. I was having a moment this week. I think I've mentioned way too many times that this is a tough season for me. I was pretty much freaking out at my current challenge and low-key throwing a tantrum to God. And I started to think about the intensity of pain. I thought about different scenarios, from losing a loved one to being ill or having relationship issues. And at the moment, I have a few problems, but I don't have 99 problems, and I believe it's the same with you. But then there is a practice that doesn't sit well with me, and that's the one saying, well, I'm so glad that I have things the way that they are, because look at that person, look at what she's going through, or look at what he's going through, look at what his issue is. I'm glad I don't have that issue. That doesn't sit well with me, because I think that we can be thankful for what we have and where we stand without comparing it to people who lack what we have. But let's think for a moment about the different types of sufferings that there are, from relationship issues, mental health, physical health, financial problems, and all of that stuff. I've got some challenges, but I don't have 99 problems. And I know you don't have 99 problems either. What gives us the right to define someone's pain as worse than another's, even ours? Well, we can't, because pain is not felt in the circumstance, it's felt in the heart. The rich man who loses a loved one does not feel a different pain from the poor person who is also suffering the same loss. His wealth doesn't cushion the pain of his loss. But then there are people who will think that it does. And all you need to do is go into IG or Threads or wherever and read a post about a celebrity who is going through a tough season, and then look at the comments. Comments will say stuff like, what is she crying about? She's rich. His life is easy. Why is he whining? At least he has a family. And then you would also hear, well, if I had what they had, my life would be better. You see, a mindset of comparison deceives us into thinking a permanent change in circumstance will bring us permanent joy. And that is not true. Think back to a time when you prayed desperately for something, an exam result, a job interview, a family, getting married, whatever. And remember how joyful you were when you received it. Now, do you still feel that way today? Especially if it's been a while. Probably not. The circumstance changed permanently, but the feelings have since dissipated. Life is ongoing. It's life in a way. You have new goals. Everything's rosy, at least in that department, but you've also forgotten the feeling, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not suggesting that you hate what you now have because you're not smiling about it. But my point is that the initial euphoria is gone, even though the circumstance has remained the same, i.e., you're still married to the same person, or you still have that job, or you passed the exams and you moved on from there. Our brains, when we face difficulties, tends to scan our memory bank to recreate scenarios that we believe is going to bring us joy, because our default leaning is to search for joy or run away from pain. And so what happens is, in a challenging season, we are abandoning our long-term goals or our vision, and we're searching for relief. And a lot of times, relief is not found on the path you're on. Relief is found somewhere else, which means you've got to pivot from where you were headed to get a hold of this relief, which might be in the form of joy. And that can permanently derail and take us off in a completely different direction. Happiness isn't always found on the path to our vision. As a matter of fact, we have happiness interspersed with challenge and pain and crying. Years ago, I was having a moment similar to what I've been having this week, and I was crying and screaming, doing the whole works, tantruming, being a child all over again. I'm talking to God. But we had returned to the UK to start life from scratch. We'd lost everything. Nothing made sense. And I told God that I was going to pray in the spirit and I wouldn't stop until my circumstance changed. As a matter of fact, I said, I'm going to get on my knees and I'm not getting up until things changed, which was clearly tantrum mode because it was 9 o'clock at night and I don't know what sort of change could possibly happen at 9 o'clock at night. But there I was on my knees praying in the spirit, and then suddenly I started getting filled with joy. There was this outpouring of joy from my heart, which I could not explain. My circumstance remained the same, but here I was just feeling incredibly joyful. And by the time I got up, I was literally working on air, and that joy lasted for days and days. Circumstance remained the same, but I was filled with joy, which tells me that it's not the circumstance that caused the pain in the first instance. It was the way that I saw it, and it was the way that I thought it. If circumstances were the primary cause of sadness, then everyone in the same situation would feel exactly the same way. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I had a personal and professional win with a Brazilian university. Spoke to some students there. Personal because of my Brazilian roots, and professional because I was speaking about the mindset of an entrepreneur in the luxury industry. And that was my first time guest lecturing, which I'm so happy I did. But it was also one of the toughest weeks for me emotionally this year. So on the surface, everything seemed to be going well. And yes, things were working out. They were going in the direction they should have been. But emotionally, I was drained. I was weary. I was tired. I was scared. I have a relative who almost brags about her pain. If I say to her things are tough, she wouldn't point out what's good in my life. Like my friends say, Titi is excellent at that. Susie is great. My goodness, I am blessed with some great friends. Olga, all of them. They would say, okay, Tux, here's what's going well in your life. And they would turn my attention toward what's going well. But this particular person wouldn't do that. If I said, oh, if I moaned, things are tough, she will say, oh, you think they're tough. Look at my life. And then she begins to brag about just how worse she has it than I do. Now, it's her belief that you can grade suffering based on external circumstances. That's why she's able to look at my circumstances and say that it is better than hers. Suffering is felt internally, not externally. Just like the doorway to pain and joy is the heart. It's not the presence or absence of a pet that brings joy or pain to my children's lives. I want to encourage you throughout this week, over the next few days, to really observe as a third party would, like it's not your life. Just kind of step back and look at your life. Look at the circumstances, look at situations that you have accused or blamed for causing pain in your life, and see if you can adopt a different perspective and see that circumstance as completely neutral, just like the ground that the farmers till their crops on is neutral. I can't wait to hear from you. I can't wait to hear your thoughts about this and your observations, and we will connect hopefully on social media. Have a good one. Thank you for listening.